Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. You've got someone in Ho Chi Minh City, right? At a casino, lost a few times, and they're just convinced, absolutely sure, their luck has to change on the next bet.
Right. It's due.
Exactly. Then maybe an investor in New York, they've had a couple of good trades feeling hot,
Yeah.
and they just throw money at the next thing, not really looking at the fundamentals.
Riding the streak, they think.
Yeah. And like halfway across the globe, maybe farmers near Kathmandu, they genuinely believe a few good harvests mean a bad one must be coming. It all has to balance out.
That balancing idea again.
Totally. Or someone in Buenos Aires, super careful about flying, that tiny chance of a crash.
Terrifying image, right.
But barely thinks twice about the drive to work, which is statistically way riskier.
Happens all the time.
And then maybe a bureaucrat, say in Seville, just keeps funding this public project that's clearly failing. Why? Because, well, they've already spent so much.
Throwing good money after bad.
So what's the common thread here? All these people, different places, different situations.
It's all about how our brains handle risk and reward and just chance. Sometimes our mental shortcuts lead us down paths that, looking back, don't seem very logical.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It really is. We've been looking at this great source. Could be notes, maybe an essay that really digs into some key cognitive biases. These are the mental glitches that pop up right when we're dealing with uncertainty, probabilities, even luck.
Luck, yeah. That's slippery concept.
Exactly. So our mission today, let's unpack these biases. Let's try to figure out why our minds work this way.
Okay.
We'll use those real-world examples from the source to see them in action. And then the important part, what can we actually do about it?
Yeah.
In our own lives, but also maybe how systems could be designed better.
Yeah, I'm really keen to get into this because this isn't just like academic theory, is it?
Not at all.
This stuff affects stock markets, government decisions, how safe we feel, and probably, let's be honest, our own day-to-day choices too. So where should we start?
Well, let's start with that very human urge to find patterns, especially where maybe there aren't any. The messy world of chance.
Ah, yes. Our brains love patterns. Sometimes a bit too much.
Precisely. And the classic bias here, the one studied a lot, is the gambler's fallacy.
Okay. Heard of that one.
Right. It's that gut feeling, that expectation, that random stuff somehow evens out in the short term. Like after a run of heads tails is somehow due. It connects back to what Kahneman and Tversky called the representativeness heuristic. Basically, we expect small samples to look like the long-term average, but, well, statistically, they often don't.
Right. Randomness is lumpy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think coin flips, 5 heads in a row. The gambler's fallacy screams, tails next, but the coin, it doesn't care. The odds are still 50-50.
It's 50-50.
And the source makes it clear this isn't just a thought experiment. It happens everywhere. Roulette, stock markets. There was even that study mentioned, looking at slot machine players. Found the gambler's fallacy was the most common distortion they saw. Really backs up what Tversky was saying. And while maybe seasoned pros are slightly less prone, replications show it's a solid, reliable bias.
So that gambler in Ho Chi Minh, thinking, my turn is coming, classic gambler's fallacy.
Textbook. And the investor feeling hot after a few wins. That's the other side of the same coin, right? Expecting the good streak to continue against the odds.
Spot on. Both are trying to impose order on randomness.
Okay, so what's next? You mentioned something related, but maybe more folk-like.
Yeah, building on that idea of streaks and balancing, the source talks about conservation of luck.
Conservation of luck. Okay, sounds intriguing.
It's this belief, maybe less formal, that luck is like a finite resource. Good luck has to be balanced by bad luck over time for a person or a team.
Ah, like the universe keeps a tally.
That's exactly the feeling. The universe keeps score. The source mentions sports fans, right? After a big lucky win, they might say, oh, we used up all our luck.
I've definitely heard that. And that can actually make them more cautious next time. Or those South Asian traders mentioned in the source after a big win, maybe they avoid another big bet, genuinely feeling like bad karma or bad luck must follow to balance things out.
Wow.
Yeah, an anthropologist, Nicholas Ruscher, actually talked about this back in the 70s, this sort of principle of conservation of luck. Maybe less lab research than the gambler's fallacy, but the source really stresses its impact on real-world risk-taking.
That's fascinating. It takes that statistical misunderstanding and adds this layer of cosmic accounting.
Pretty much.
And you can totally see the Nepalese farmers fitting into this, right? Believing good and bad harvests must balance. It's that same gut feeling after a run of one thing, the opposite has to happen.
It's a powerful intuition.
So thinking about this, have you ever caught yourself feeling like, good things were due after a bad run? Or maybe the opposite, worried that a string of good luck meant something bad was lurking around the corner? It's kind of pervasive, isn't it?
It really is. We seem wired for it.
All right, so let's switch gears a bit. We've talked about finding patterns, maybe false patterns. What about when our emotions just hijack our sense of probability?
Yes. This brings us to neglect of probability. It's a big one in risk research. People like Paul Slovic have done tons of work here. It basically highlights how bad we humans often are at dealing calmly with probabilities, especially small ones.
Small probabilities, like winning the lottery or
getting struck by lightning, yeah. The source points out we tend to react in one of two extreme ways. Either we completely ignore the tiny risk, treat it as zero, or we totally freak out, overreact, act like it's almost certain to happen, especially if the outcome is really vivid or scary. We're just not good at handling the nuance of, say, a 0.0001% chance.
We prefer 0 or 100%.
Seems like it sometimes. The examples in the source are really telling. That person in Buenos Aires, terrified of the minuscule risk of a plane crash. It's a dramatic visual fear, right? Amplified by news. But they're relatively calm about the much higher statistical risk of a car accident on the way to the airport, because that's just normal, every day.
Mundane.
Or the example about missile strikes in Squirtle Row.
Yeah.
Obviously incredibly traumatic, and the images are powerful, constant media focus. So people worry intensely about that, maybe more than the statistically larger, but less immediate or visual threat of heart disease.
Wow. That really puts it in perspective.
And this ties right into the availability bias, doesn't it? Things that are easy to remember, vivid, emotional, they feel more likely. The source mentions lottery buyers. They're not really buying based on the astronomical odds.
No, they're buying the dream.
Exactly. The vivid dream of riches. The emotional pull just swamps the actual math.
That makes so much sense. It's the power of the story versus the power of the statistic. Our brains latch onto the story.
You really do.
So for you listening, think about it. Has there been a time you've been really worried about something super unlikely, maybe something you saw in the news, a worst-case scenario that just got stuck in your head? While at the same time, maybe you weren't quite as cautious about a much more common everyday risk?
That's a good question to ask yourself. It makes you think about how much public discourse or even personal anxiety is shaped by these vivid, available risks rather than the purely statistical ones.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've had faulty patterns, emotional overrides. What's the third bias the source highlights? Something about being stuck in the past.
Yes, exactly. This is the sunk cost fallacy. Very common, often quite painful.
Sunk costs, like money already spent.
Money, time, effort, anything you've already invested. The fallacy is continuing down a path purely because of that past investment, even when, looking rationally at the future costs and benefits, it doesn't make sense anymore.
The throwing good money after bad thing.
That's the perfect phrase for it. Arks and Bloomer really documented this back in the 80s, and the source gives some great examples that, well, they probably hit home for a lot of us.
Like what?
Well, there's that Spanish bureaucrat we mentioned, right, feeling they have to keep funding a failing project because stopping would mean admitting all the money spent so far was wasted.
Oof. Politically difficult.
Hugely.
Yeah.
Or those massive public works projects, maybe in Japan, that just keep going. Way over budget because stopping feels impossible after sinking so much into them already.
Right.
And the classic personal one. You bought an expensive concert ticket. The day comes, you feel awful, maybe have a conflict. Rationally, stay home. But the sunk cost, the ticket price, makes you drag yourself there anyway, just so it doesn't feel wasted.
Oh, I've definitely done that. Or finish a terrible movie just because I was already an hour in.
Exactly. It's that feeling of needing to get your money's worth or see it through, even when it's no longer enjoyable or beneficial. The source mentioned that interesting study, didn't it? About seeing your past self as different.
Yeah, how might that help?
Well, the idea, if you can mentally separate your current self from the past self who made the initial investment, it might make it easier to evaluate the situation now based on current prospects, rather than feeling bound by that past decision.
Interesting psychological trick.
It is. And studies consistently show this sunk cost effect is real, it's robust, both in labs and life. Though, interestingly, just knowing about the bias, being educated on it, can help reduce it a bit.
Okay, there's hope. So another question for you listening. Be honest. Can you think of a time you stuck with something, maybe a project, a job, even a relationship, a subscription, longer than you should have, mainly because you'd already put so much into it?
It's a tough one. It taps into our aversion to loss or desire for consistency.
Yeah. It's hard to admit when it's time to cut losses. Okay, so we got these four big ones. Gambler's fallacy, conservation of luck messing with chance, neglect of probability letting emotions rule, and sunk cost fallacy anchoring us to the past. Clearly powerful stuff. So, the big question. How do we deal with them? What can we do?
Right. And the source helpfully breaks this down into two levels. First, thinking about applied leverage, design and nudging.
Okay, so how systems can help us.
Exactly. Designing things interfaces, information displays, choice structures in ways that gently steer us away from these pitfalls.
Like how?
Well, for gambling or trading platforms, maybe the software constantly shows the real odds, or explicitly states past results don't affect future outcomes. A direct counter to the gambler's fallacy.
Makes the irrational thought harder to maintain.
Precisely. For sunk costs, UX designers can be clever. Instead of showing a progress bar highlighting how much time or money you've already put in, they could frame it around future benefits. What's left to gain? What's the positive outcome you're working towards? Like that example of a quit smoking app showing health benefits gained, not just money saved or previously spent.
Ah, shifting the focus from past loss to future gain. Smart.
It's all about framing. And in professional settings like project management, sometimes you need that tough conversation, explicitly stating the future probability. Look, even with more resources, our chance of success from this point is only 15%. It forces a confrontation with the sunk cost impulse.
Brings reality crashing in.
Sometimes necessary. And, of course, marketing knows this stuff too, those risk-free trials. They bank on our neglect of the small probability we'll actually bother to cancel.
Guilty as charged. Okay, so that's the system level. What about us as individuals? What's our personal defense radar? Our own strategies?
This is where self-awareness is key. For the gambler's fallacy, actively remind yourself, especially when you see a streak, each event is independent. The roulette wheel, the coin they don't remember.
Keep chanting independent events.
Pretty much. For conservation of luck. When you hear that fatalistic talk, our luck ran out, we're due for misfortune, challenge it. Remind yourself about randomness. Calculate actual odds if you can, or just acknowledge chance plays a role. Don't buy into the cosmic balancing act.
Got it. Ditch the superstition.
Right. For neglect of probability, the best defense is learn some basic stats. Seriously. How to read probabilities, percentages. For big decisions, health, finance, make yourself look up the actual data from reliable sources. Don't just go with your gut or scary headlines. Ask, what is the likelihood here?
Use data, not drama.
Exactly. And finally, sunk cost fallacy. Cultivate the habit of pausing before doubling down. Ask the killer question, am I doing this because it's the best path forward, or just to justify past investments?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Try that zero-based thinking.
Yeah.
Imagine starting today. Knowing what you know now with the resources you have now, would you still choose this? If the answer is no, well, it's probably time to reconsider.
That's really powerful. It reframes the decision entirely. So these strategies, they're about pausing, of identifying the likely bias, and then consciously seeking out objective information or reframing the situation.
It's about building that mental muscle, giving ourselves agency against these automatic responses.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. We dove into the gambler's fallacy, conservation of luck, neglect of probability, and the sunk cost fallacy. We saw how they pop up everywhere, and we talked about strategies, both system level and personal, to navigate them.
And the main takeaway really isn't that humans are hopelessly irrational. It's that our mental shortcuts, our intuitions, while often useful, can sometimes lead us astray in predictable ways, especially with chance and cost involved. Just recognizing that, being aware, is huge. It's the first step.
That awareness really is key, isn't it? You can start building it right away.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought, pulling directly from the source's reflection exercises.
Yeah.
For the next week, try being a bias spotter.
A bias spotter. I like that.
Yeah. See if you can notice these things in action. Maybe it's in the news, a politician justifying a project, a friend talking about a hot streak, an ad playing on fear.
Or even just yourself feeling you have to finish that mediocre book.
Exactly. And maybe try that self-reflection too. Think about a past decision where you felt stuck or overly worried or maybe too optimistic about odds. Could one of these biases have been nudging you? Analyzing those moments, thinking about what a purely rational or statistical choice might have looked like. It can teach you a lot about these subtle forces.
That's a great challenge. Observe the world, observe yourself. It really brings it all home. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
Really interesting stuff to think about.
Thanks for joining us.